How's it going, everyone? This is the All Gaming Blog here, playing guys Black Ops 2 Zombies gameplay. This was actually the first time I ever played on this map, because as you know, this is Die Rise, and I don't usually have it, but I did got it as a kind of demo thingy. And this was for the first time. It's not too bad. I did have a live commentary on it, but sadly enough, the audio kind of screwed itself up over and over again. So I just there's no more commentary for it. Sorry about that, but that's just the way it goes. But it's great that now I have 20 minutes to talk to you guys about something that I haven't even spoken much about, which is the next gen consoles comparison, and basically just saying what's what, and comparing facts instead of opinions, and just be an Xbox basher and a PS4 lover. I suppose that's the trend nowadays. I've seen a lot of confusion about the power differences between these two consoles. So I figure I toss in some research I've done on this topic. By all means, if I missed something, please leave it in the comments below, or leave me your opinions as well. So let's talk about what the consoles most are prominent more, which is GPU raw power. This is pretty simple. The PS4 has 50% more GCN units than the Xbox One. In layman's terms, the PS4 has a GPU equivalent to Radeon 78070, and the Xbox One has a GPU equivalent to Radeon 77090. How do these two actually compare? So AnandTech has a great benchmark tool that lets us see just that. On identical systems, here's the difference in frames per second across those two cards on a different number of games. So for those of you who don't want to click on the link down below, which is the sources, which I'm going to leave links there. It just goes this way. This is a test on Far Cry 3 on ultra settings. On the Xbox One GPU, it would run at 31.7 frames per second. On a PlayStation 4 GPU, it would run at 49 frames per second. So the PlayStation 4 performed 54.5% better than the Xbox One. As you guys can see, the difference is massive. This performance increase is pretty significant, and it's potentially pretty linear as expected. But that's obviously GPU performance is not all. We're also going to compare CPU performance. These should be near identical. Both are using 8-core AMD APUs that seem clocked at the same speeds. In fact, because they are both running on x86 architectures, porting between the two and between PCs becomes so much easier. We won't see funky things like the challenges the PS3 cell processor raised that result in the worst ports of games. Most prominently, Skyrim. It's been terrible. Now, the game didn't port very well on the PlayStation, and it actually yellow ringed some of them when it first came out. It still plays very chunkily on the console. Keep in mind that the PS3 is a powerful console itself, but it doesn't play the game very well because the port is so terrible. The DLCs on it take over even a year longer just to come to that, just to develop for it. It's just so difficult. Developers hate it. I think Sony went in a wrong step by choosing that architecture, but they wanted to do something different and something what they thought was better. It didn't work. They took a gamble. It didn't work out. Oh well. Let's move on. Let's move on to the RAM speed, actually. Basically, because the CPU is basically the same, let's better move on. There's not much comparison there. I'm not going to go into much more detail than that. RAM speed. So here is where things get a little bit more complicated, and you need to take a moment to understand the APU architecture. So the AMD APU puts both the CPU and the GPU on the same chip. Now, these consoles are the first time the AMD's APUs offer true unified memory, also known as UMA, where the shared memory pool allows the CPU and the GPU to exchange memory addresses. Previously, while both the CPU and the GPU used the same memory pools, if data wanted to be shared between the two, the data had to be copied from the GPU's area in RAM to the CPU's area in RAM. Now, they can just tell each other where in RAM things are located by passing memory addresses to each other. I'll talk more about this later. So, okay, RAM is shared and it's super neat. So what? Well, the PS4 went with all GDDR5 RAM, offering a full 8 gigabytes at 107 gigabytes per second transfer rate. The Xbox One went with 8 gigabytes DDR3 and 32 megabytes of ESR RAM. For a true output of, well, we don't really know. We don't actually really know how fast it will be, as the DDR3 runs at 68 gigabytes per second, and the ESR RAM could theoretically boost this to 190 gigabytes per second, but we don't really know. And it's only for those 32 megabytes, which would be really used as a cache in this case. So we still don't know much about the Xbox One RAM. How and why does this matter? We know from past benchmarks that RAM speed really matters for the performance of APUs in games. In these benchmarks, Tom's Hardware looks at various RAM speeds for an APU in several games. While not the same architecture as the APUs in the consoles, we can see that when not bottlenecked by GPU computation, as increased in memory throughput of 11.2%, resulting in gains of 27.5% for frames per second. So, using the AVP numbers without any effects, keep in mind the built-in GPU on this APU was pretty crappy, so numbers are going to be computer limited. I don't know how the UMA will change these results, or if where's the point of diminishing returns of RAM speed based on computational power for the next gen system, but faster RAM for the APU's GPUs can definitely mean better graphics. Now, that's been said, and I'll give you a moment to just take it all in. Let's talk about RAM latency. So there's this common response to the DDR3 versus the GDDR5 memory that says, but GDDR5 has higher latency than DDR3. I'm not sure where this myth comes from, but my guess would be functional tests of latency where the discrete GPU itself is an influencing factor. Here's the published latency speeds for GDDR5 from Hinix PDF, page number 48. Again, link in the description. And for DDR3, again, link is going to be in the description. For those that don't care to read the links in the description, the timings are better for GDDR5 than for DDR3. That's how it goes. Clock speeds still needs to be known for calculating the latency, so let's figure those out real quick. So Xbox One DDR3 clock speed goes at 2133 megahertz, basically 2 gigahertz. PS4 doesn't have a listed clock speed, so we'll do a napkin calculation that hopefully give us a ballpark estimate. The PS4 is using 16 512 megabytes GDDR5 chips, so theoretically each module has to support a true output of 11 gigabytes per second. Using the numbers on Wikipedia from Kimonda's clock speeds for a 512 megabytes model, the clock speed would need to be around 2750 megahertz to support 11 gigabytes per second at 4 gigabytes per gigahertz. We then double that because it's DDR and we get 5500 megahertz. So we get about 5 gigahertz out of that. So by all measures, the PS4 would actually have lower RAM latency than the Xbox One. Please note that the sections in math and figures are the ones I'm at least certain about, and I welcome better data. I really don't know. These don't seem very accurate to me. So I'm probably gonna have to take a better look at this and just to see things better. So far, it doesn't seem that the GDDR5 is much better in comparison, or if you take an in-depth look into it, if you see. Let's move on to unified memory bonuses. Remember earlier when I was talking about UMA and unified memory? Well, Mark Cerny, lead architect of the PS4, had an amazing interview with Kama Sutra back in April. If you guys remember, I think I covered it in a video, I'm not sure. I'll probably leave a link in the description if I have. In it, he talks about using a faster ES RAM. And I quote, one thing we could have done is drop it down to 128-bit bus, which would drop the bandwidth to 88 gigabytes per second, and then have ED-RAM on chip to bring the performance back up again. Said certainly, while the solution initially looked appealing to the team due to its ease of manufacturability, it was abandoned thanks to the complexity it would add for developers. We did not want to create some kind of puzzle that the development community would have to solve in order to create the games. And so we stayed true to the philosophy of unified memory. So what are the neat things that the PS4 can do that may be hard on the Xbox One due to the complexity of the memory subsystem GPU compute? A dozen programs running simultaneously on that GPU, using it to perform physics computations, to perform collision calculations, to do ray tracing for audio. So that extra 50% of GPU power won't just be rendering frames. If the GPU is operating at only 80% to render a frame, in theory, the extra 20% can be handling physics calculations and etc. This is huge, as it reduces bottlenecks from the CPU in things like AI or physics, and it depends very much on the UMA to do this successfully. So we have yet to hear detailed tech reports from Microsoft on the UMA potential. The most recent info was about the ESRAM throughput, which is promising, but I really question if 32 megabytes is going to be enough for UMA architecture, or if speed of the throughput is the cost of flexibility of UMA. Regardless, even if they do have no issues in UMA, the worst GPU means there will be a lot less of the GPU left over to take on compute tasks. Ultimately, the UMA task could end up being like the cell programming, where it never really gets used properly except by exclusive games. But it sounds easy enough to manage that it shouldn't be difficult to get at least some performance increases in traditionally non-GPU tasks from the system. So basically, the main concern right now is not to repeat the same PS3 mistakes, which is the PS3 has a lot of power in it, but you can't really use that power because it's hard to program it. So imagine you have a car that does 100 miles, but you don't know how to drive that fast and you only do 50. So you have a car that can do 100, but you're not really using your hardware to its max capacity, thanks to the to the architecture that the PS3 is currently at. Anyways, I'll talk about that more later on. System availability. So the Xbox One runs 2 operating systems and a hypervisor to switch between them. The PS4 only runs 1. How does this play out for the games? The Xbox One has 5 gigabytes of RAM available for the games. Link will be in the description with the source. The Xbox One has up to 2 cores of the CPU, which is basically 25%, and 10% of the GPU reserved for the systems. The PS4 has 7 gigabytes available for games out of its 8 gigabytes. I haven't found out any data on how much of the CPU and GPU is reserved for the system on the PS4, but I don't think that's going to be that much. So the whole switching operative system aspect of the Xbox takes a pretty big bite out of the already inferior system resources. Again, let's go back to the PlayStation 3 and let's think about when the PlayStation 3 was able to have a Linux operative system on it and basically use the PS3 as a computer. That was an idea that was dropped because it was taking so much resources out of the PS3 that it just could not be supported any further. The idea was there and was a good idea, but the performance and the technology just wasn't there at the time. Now, we obviously have more resources to use it, and although it's great that the Xbox One has Microsoft Windows 8, but it comes at a big cost. Now, out of 8 gigs, we're using 3 gigabytes just to support the operative system in the background. Now, most computers nowadays don't even take that much. They take at least 1 gigabyte to 2 gigabytes max on the operative system and background tasks, depending on how much you do. I'm talking about the bare basics. I'm not talking about you having Skype open, Steam, and tons of other crap running in your background. I'm talking about just normal, having your computer with antivirus running in background, and that's it. You need at least 1 GB just to run it. You know, Xbox One is taking 3. Now, the PS4 is taking 1, but you can understand that the menu and their operative system is so smaller compared to Xbox One. Xbox One had the main operative system. Not talking about Windows 8, I'm talking about the normal MBCD or whatever you call it. That's the main one that you're going to be playing games, but then you have Windows 8, which you can do other tasks and basically use it as a computer, kind of. So, is that really good idea in Microsoft's parts? You know, we already know that they dropped the whole DRM situation off. You know, they already did a 180 in one of them. So they might drop this operative system Windows 8 off in the future because it's taking a huge chunk and that's going to affect game performance. Now, Microsoft has done an official statement saying that you know what, just because the Xbox One has inferior hardware does not mean that you know that doesn't mean anything. What matters is how the games will play and how smooth the games are going to play in, and you know what matters is the games, not the system hardware, which I kind of agree in a way, and I disagree in another, seeing that they have inferior hardware and they're already taking a huge chunk out of it to support something that most people don't particularly care about. I mean, again, the idea that you want the whole system entertainment media out of a console is ridiculous. You know, you want a console to play games and you want it on the cheap, because if you don't, then you just go buy a gaming PC, which is a lot superior. Again, you can... if you want a whole entertainment system, just get a good computer. They don't even cost that much. You know, $500, $600, $700, you can get a good gaming PC, a decent one that will play most games. If you want a console just to play games, obviously you can watch Netflix and do more stuff in it, but just to play games, then you go buy a console. You plug it into your TV, and that's it. You're set. Again, I don't want to bash them too much, but I guess this intake is not the best in their interest. The difference between these two systems is actually massive. It's great. On every single issue, the PS4 is more powerful than the Xbox One. It's better designed for the unified memory architecture, which will likely be a huge deal in the next few years of game programming. The PS4 is at least 50% more powerful than the Xbox One, is an additional 25% of the PS4's price. Again, the PS4 is a lot better architecturally, you know, has a lot better hardware, more expensive hardware, and it is 25% cheaper than the Xbox One. Okay, granted, it's mostly due to the Kinect bullcrap putting in there, so the government can spy on you better, but, you know, prices do matter. Understand that the difference between these two systems is much bigger than the Xbox 360 versus the PS3. The closest system differences that I could track down was the difference between the GameCube and the PlayStation 2. You can see how actually they ended up looking for cross-platform ports from Resident Evil, for example. I'm not sure if this will be greater now, but the difference is there, and it's not just some, you know, thing. The technology checks out. So these two systems, although different, they have the same architecture. The PS3 and Xbox 360 are a lot different from each other. So, you know, that right now we're gonna have a more level playing field. One thing I can say though is that they are looking more like gaming PCs more now than ever before, which means better ports in between consoles and PCs. So because the PS3 has such a different architecture, it makes for ports and games a lot harder to make. I'm glad Sony decided to change that and go to a more traditional way of doing things. Guys, I hope you take a moment to, you know, soak all this in and really think about all of this that I just said. Probably it's a lot of mumbo jumbo and a lot of technological talk. So if you can understand it, great. If you don't understand it, at least you know that the PS4 is going to be hardware more, is going to have a better hardware and more for games than Xbox One. The facts are being said. There's links in the description where you guys can click and read it for yourselves if you want to have a better understanding of this. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. If so, please do leave a like. Also comment with your, you know, just thoughts on this and whatnot. And, well, I guess this has been it. So thanks for listening to me, and thanks for watching this gameplay. Not the greatest, but oh well. Peace.